Hi. You all right?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with my hair. I think right. Do you know what I mean when I say I look a bit like Frankenstein?
Oh my God, yeah. I actually do.
I've got Frankenstein hair. Even though he had his bolts in his neck, it feels like they're here in my head.
I absolutely know what you mean. Is that bad that I know what you mean? Like, is that a bad friend thing to say?
No, I think it's a really good friend thing to say, because if I said, do I look awful in this, and I did, I think you'd tell me. So I'm glad you said yeah, because if you said you couldn't tell what I meant with my Frankenstein hair, I'd have been like, she's lying.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Oh.
What's going on with you? Are you getting a phone call?
Yeah. Yeah, could you tell? It's from school.
Oh, all right. Oh, they're obviously keeping you back for detention.
Yes, they are. It's hard because it rings on my phone and my watch now. So
I get that, but I get it on my phone, my watch, and for some reason my iPad starts ringing.
If the iPad starts, that's it. Like, all right, I've got a phone call.
Why does everything have to do it? So anyway, we're not going to even have a big chat, are we? Because our next chat is like completely off topic. Well, it's not completely off topic, but it's a lot different than our other ones. I said this a few weeks ago and it wasn't different, but this one is different, isn't it?
Well, it is, because it's our second non-sober person.
Oh, it was our first.
Mark and Liam. Well, Mark from Wise Up, he was our first non-sober person. And then, so this is our second non-sober person that we've had on the podcast, but we did say that we were going to do things a little bit differently. And I think this is actually a really, really important topic. And it's nice to hear it kind of from the other side. So Em is the partner of Sober Dave. And
we've had on here, haven't we? We've had
we have. And honestly, that episode with Sober Dave, so if you've not heard it, please go back and listen to it, because it's absolutely hilarious. Although now we've spoke to Em, maybe we shouldn't laugh so much.
I know it does sound like she went through quite a rough time while he was out chasing foxes, doesn't it?
I know, but it's so interesting to hear her side.
It is, and she's absolutely lovely. Such an inspirational woman. So Emma Campbell, otherwise known as Limitless Em. Hi, Em. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Good. I'm good. It's lovely to be here. Thank you.
It seems like ages since we spoke on. Did you do something on the sober sessions? You did something on.
I did the brilliant sober sessions. Yeah, I came in for quite an early on, I think, as the partner of, which is something which is an important conversation, isn't it? And as the partner of Sober Dave, the wife of Sober Dave, I've got quite a lot to say on the subject, and I've been through my journey with it as he has.
I didn't get to see that because I can't remember why. Had I just gone through a miscarriage and I wasn't, that was my miscarriage time, wasn't it? And I'd gone through my miscarriage and you were on, and I remember I was watching it, and even though like I wasn't in a very good place, I felt like I had big bad FOMO.
I remember you. Yeah, no, they were brilliant, those sessions. But it's so important to shine the light. And I often say this to Dave, or Dave and I often say it. He's the partner of someone living with secondary breast cancer, and he doesn't get a chance to voice how it's been for him enough. And I'm the partner of someone who's sober, thankfully, but was, absolutely at the opposite end of sober a couple of years ago. And I think the partner's perspective is something we both feel really strongly about sharing.
We say this a lot, don't we? Because alcoholism doesn't just affect the person, it does affect the families and the people around them. And I loved it when you came on the sober sessions, Em, because my ex-husband was an alcoholic, and just listening to you talk, it's just like, I'm not the only person in the world. So I think it's going to be so nice to get your perspective for the people that listen, that do have alcoholic partners or people that are dependent on drink. Because although I had my own issues with alcohol, and I was a binge drinker, and I was drinking to escape a lot of the time, being an alcoholic is never something that I'm massively associated with. And I think his drinking is what kind of helped me to stop drinking, if you like, more than having my own rock bottom. So I'm dying to like talk to you again, and let's get the perspective for our listeners as well.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more.
Would you kick us off then with just, I know that your story is massive, and I mean, I love how you call yourself, and when we were doing your bio before, like you don't call yourself a cancer survivor, you call yourself a cancer thriver, and you really are. I mean, when you look at everything you've managed to accomplish and achieve over the years, it's amazing. So could you just kick us off with a little bit about your story, and then we'll move on to Dave.
Sure.
Dave's had enough. Dave's had his say. He's not allowed his say.
Yeah, I mean, my kind of story began nearly 11 years ago when I was diagnosed with breast cancer for the first time. I'd recently given birth to triplets, so my triplets were 6 months old. My eldest son was nearly 7, and I was just coming through a horrendously difficult separation with their dad. And I was diagnosed with invasive breast cancer, so breast cancer that had already gone into my lymph nodes. I'd had a lump for years. I'd had it checked over the years, but as a woman in your 30s, you're kind of like, quite natural. It was okay. It feels like a cyst. Don't worry, come back if it changes. I had a mammogram at some point, and that was fine. But the changes that I did definitely notice in those early months after the triplets were born, and during the really difficult points at home, I ignored, and I didn't act on. So by the time I finally kind of got my head around going to the GP, I had and a diagnosis. I had a 5 centimeter tumor. So I kind of embarked life, talking of rock bottoms, which I know is a term that talking of sobriety and alcoholism, it's a term, isn't it, that's used a lot. But I was already, people often say, well, how did you feel when you were first diagnosed? Well, to be honest, I was already at a physical and an emotional rock bottom, because as miraculous and wonderful as it was for my triplets to have arrived after years of recurrent miscarriage and secondary infertility, absolute miracle, and they were healthy and thriving, but life in every way had kind of imploded. So I was already kind of on the floor. So when the diagnosis came, it was just almost like a kind of, because I felt like I didn't really feel like I had any further to fall, to be honest. But anyway, I embarked on all of the treatment that they threw at me, and I responded really, really well. And, after a very brutal year of mastectomy, chemo, radiotherapy, hormone treatment, I recovered and I went into remission, and I did really, really well. And then followed the kind of single mum of 4 years, kind of in remission from cancer, dealing with the daily, toddler triplets, preschool age triplets, an older boy, and still kind of no real closure on the relationship. So but physically doing really, really well, but mentally not, really, really crippled with the fear of the cancer coming back, and ultimately me not being here for the kids. That was the total preoccupation. And I look back now and I shudder to think of my mental state, really. And I just remained in kind of survival mode, being mum, doing my best, doing all of the practical things, but internally just really unable, sadly, to kind of feel the joy of what I had and to be present. Anyway, to kind of cut through it quite quickly, I got through those 4 or 5 years and really felt like I turned a corner. The triplet started school, Jake started secondary school. It was like, God, I'm nearly at the 5-year clear. I've done it. Relationship closure, feeling physical and strong and well and optimistic, a real mindset shift, and then found out that my cancer had returned. So I found myself in the secondary breast cancer category, which is something that I was in denial about for years, actually. I mean, there's been parallels with being in, dealing with an alcohol dependency, or any kind of addiction. Dave and I have talked about this a lot, the kind of both being in denial with certain issues, and then both going into recovery with. So it's interesting, we talk about it such a lot. But alongside this devastating, terrifying secondary diagnosis, as that was all unfolding, I was also falling in love very heavily and very quickly with the man you now know as Sober Dave. So there were these two real extremes of life, you know, going on side by side. Sort of the heady, loved up, oh my God, this amazing man's appeared in my life. And oh my God, this time it's really, you know, I'm stage 4, right? It's all of those words that I tend to avoid labeling myself with, but I was in that category. So yeah, and then, gosh, I mean, I could, do you want me to go on for the next?
I mean,
if you're happy to, yeah,
I'm
definitely.
happy to. So Dave and I, as you know, the gist of our story, we met, we fell in love very quickly, very intensely, and he was phenomenal. He, from day one, was there, rock solid, and the most amazing man I'd ever met. But we weren't living together. You know, I was lucky enough to be able to have time with him, the odd night with him. I felt very cared for. I felt very loved. I felt very safe with him. And he was present for me, or so I thought, and was by my side at chemo and, you know, incredible. But I didn't realise that he had a huge drink problem. And it sounds funny to say that, so how can you not realise it? But all our issues come in different sort of packages, don't they? And for me, without going into the detail, the relationship with my ex-partner had been influenced by too much alcohol, but it showed itself in such a different way that I didn't recognise it in Dave.
Yeah. Right.
Because in so many ways, Dave was the most stable, steady man I'd ever met. So I thought. Because he was functioning, you know, highly functioning, responsible, up every day, working 10, 11, 12-hour day, showing up, you know, never letting me down. And so, you know, I got through chemo. I've remained on treatment ever since that second diagnosis. So I've been on regular, you know, maintenance chemotherapy for 6 years now. But again, did very well, went back into remission, and within a year, David sold his house and moved in with me and, you know, 5-year-old triplets, feral 5-year-old triplets, a 12-year-old, into a very small little house with very, very, very thin walls.
Oh gosh.
You know, just like, he didn't know what had hit, he did not know what had hit him. And actually, in a way, thank God we were so loved up and naive, because really a sensible couple would have just taken it slowly, but we didn't, and that's not the way we are. But thankfully, and there was so many points where it felt that we were heading for the rocks as a couple, and in a way all of those kind of opinions around us of, well, are you sure you're not rushing it? Actually, there was a long time where it felt like, God, yeah, we really messed up here, you know. He's an alcoholic, the step family thing, you know, all the differences in who we are, the conflict, anyway, we've come through the other side, so it's worked out. But there were lots of rocky moments along the way. Dave's drinking became a problem within a few months of our relationship, of him moving in. I couldn't work out why we kept rowing, and pretty much every night, you know. And for a long time, I put it down to the pressure of all of the obvious things: his sudden change of life, you know, the adjustment to going from a single man living in his neat and tidy home to stepdad of 4. No privacy for us. Our sex life kind of, you know, that honeymoon bubble just burst the minute he walked in. And the responsibility, the huge increase in what was expected of him as a partner, and you know, just by nature of him stepping into our world. He'd said to me the very last night that we spent at his house a week before he moved in, he said to me over dinner, I've got to tell you something, I'm a functioning alcoholic. And I was so shocked and couldn't take in what he said that I went into denial, and I chose to ignore what he'd said. There was a under offer sign, sold sign outside his house. You know, his house, we were eating off paper plates, everything was packed up. What on earth was I supposed to do with that? So I decided, I kind of remember going, but you can't be, you're not. But at no point did I think, someone else might have thought, well, okay, mate, forget the finance and forget the mess. This would, I didn't want anything to change. I loved him, but it was too enormous for me to comprehend. So I just put it somewhere, I compartmentalized it. And, so, within a few months, it just became very clear that there was a personality change every single night. But, as we all know, we change when we have a drink, and he would change. And I know he wouldn't mind me saying it, the kind of dog with a bone, the nitpicking, the complaining about, the kids or noise or the mess. And so this wedge just started to really kind of come between us. But we were in this cycle where we'd kind of fall out every night, pretty much every night. It felt he would drink hugely, pass out on the sofa, or we'd have had a row, sleep in separate beds. But the next morning he got up, he went to work, and he would be the decent man that I loved and the humble and self-aware man that I loved. So it kind of, the time went by, and we'd go through, but we became, what was sort of so sad was that we'd gone from being what I thought this really healthy couple. When you look at your life and you think, and for someone in her 40s to say, God, I finally feel like I'm in a healthy relationship. I was so proud of that. Yeah. And I'd fought so hard to get to where I was as a mum, as a parent, with a life, with stability. And he'd added so much to that. But suddenly it was like this toxic poison, that was just going to destroy everything. But it was very, very confusing because, like I say, it still didn't, you could easily, probably could fall into that category where people say, oh, you're right, friends with you. I don't see Dave like that. No, see, does he really? God, he's lovely. And, so and depending on your kind of state of mind, and I was drinking,
I was just going to ask that, Em. Sorry. Was you drinking like a similar amount at the time to kind of?
Yeah. So I've always, luckily, I long may it last, but I've never had I've naturally got quite a moderate way of being with things, apart from chocolate. So, I've kind of got a natural cutoff, and, that term lightweight. But before Dave, I just couldn't tolerate, I would love wine. I love nothing more than seeing some girlfriends and sharing a bottle of wine, I love that. But luckily, I very rarely go beyond a certain point because I can't bear the feeling, and it doesn't take much. But got to be honest. And it's funny you talk about them, because I don't even like admitting that I was drinking more, because I feel a bit embarrassed, because but I definitely was, because that was a huge part of what we did together. And from when we met, and I would go to his house for our little bubbles of respite and falling in love time, and that friends and family would help me have that break from the kids and the treatment, and I'd be sipping on my Prosecco, able to forget cancer for a bit and responsibility, and he'd be knocking about, but we just would, rock solid. And then,
sorry to interrupt you, you don't notice it like in the same way, because when you're in anything though, like when you're looking at somebody, and even if you yourself was to have developed a problem in that time, you probably wouldn't have noticed it, because Dave was drinking more. And that's what happened to me with my ex-husband, and that's what happened to Lisa, and that's what actually kept us both stuck in the cycle of this destructive drinking.
Well, I think that's it. So very much, I think the pattern that we got into was that, and I was having therapy at the time, and I'd go there and I'd say, but we had another bad weekend, we had a row, and the therapist would say, if he doesn't stop, you're not going to make it if something doesn't change. And again, I remember, but I just need him to kind of moderate or cut down, and I'd always sort of live in this hope that, because very much the daily drinking, because he'd always been a daily drinker, and because there is something. When he gave up drinking, I remember talking about the kind of grieving period of realizing that he and I again would never experience that mutual.
I get that as well. Yeah.
That was a lot to get my head around. But to go back to the bit when we were still drinking, because so much of our relationship was you know, mutual, such love for each other, and shared humor, and both loving to do the same things, you know, it would be that, oh yeah, we would love that first couple of drinks in the evening. But like you said, I would stop on a good night at 1, on another night at 2, on a Friday night maybe at half a bottle. But it was turning into an everyday thing for me. And that, but he was drinking 2-3 bottles plus the beers every single night. So again, I was still positioning myself comfortably in that very moderate drinker, because of course I was, you know, and of course I was compared to that brother. And so I often think, God, if he'd carried on, what would that, you know,
what would it have led to?
So what the one of the many positives is that once he stopped, I then sort of slipped back into the drinker I naturally probably am, which is someone who enjoys it when she does it, doesn't need it, doesn't give it too much thought. And, you know, like, it's funny, like at the moment I've been going through this phase of, I don't know how I discovered it, but I've been buying like 5% like Spermant Carver or whatever, and there'll be a bottle in the fridge, and I'll just have like, and it's, I'm not saying, oh, I'm so amazing, but it's like there'll be a bottle of 5 or 6% Carver, and it will last for ages. It'll end up going flat, but it's really nice. I do enjoy it. And then there's another part of me that and again, because, you know, when you're married to someone, you're so close, and you get but you have all those touchy moments with each other, or defensiveness, or you don't want to be told what to do. And, you know, there have been times where I think there's a stubborn part of me, and I'm being really honest here, there's a stubborn part of me that doesn't want to completely give up, because it's almost like, well, you're the, like, don't, because it's not, doesn't feel like it's an issue. And because he would love me to, there's a part of me that's sort of almost like, do you get what I mean, without me sounding really
no, you don't sound bad, Em. Honestly, you don't, and you really don't. And I think it's probably because you're on this Be Sober podcast. It's like, do I have to justify it?
You're going to get lots of thumbs down.
You know what? It's so important that we have these conversations, because there is a continuum of drinkers. There are people who don't ever drink. There are people who drink so much that they don't function, and there are a whole load of people in between. And this is what we say quite a lot. It is such a personal journey, and if it's not a problem for you, it's not a problem. So you know, we're very much in that camp now, where we say, look, you know, we're not trying to make everybody stop drinking. I mean, we are actually, and we are trying to make everybody stop drinking.
Like, if we've got Em sober by the end of this podcast, I'd be pulsing.
But we do recognise, but we do recognise that if it's not a problem for the person, then it's not a problem. If you're sat there questioning your own drinking and only drinking 1 glass a year, then it's a problem. And I think we have the same understanding of that, don't we, Lisa? I mean, I've got family members who drink regular drink, you know, regular drink, and they drink more now than they ever did.
Right.
But never as much as kind of I did, or my other family members did. So comparatively speaking, they don't have a problem. Would I like them to stop? Yeah, because I'd like them to experience what I now know to be true for me. But
what it is, to sort of, to round up on that, it's the wonderful, gosh, I often think, bloody hell, where would we have both headed? I certainly would have been drinking more than I should have done, absolutely, which is not good in any way, certainly for someone who lives with cancer. You know, I'm very, very mindful of that. You know, I know enough about it to know that it's not an ideal thing. So I'm kind of the relief of knowing that it's now not really something that features in our home, in our life together, is a real relief. And in terms of the kids, it's just taken it out of the equation. Like, you know, it's funny, we've got a friend in our social bubble, and he was staying with us a couple of weeks ago, in our support bubble. And he said, my son is nearly 18, and he said, oh, Jake, do you ever have a beer, Jake? And, you know, and he said, no. He said, well, there's never any beer in this house. And there was something about, but he does. And I was like, do you think if there were beers in the fridge? He said, well, only if I was really thirsty, because I know, and he's you know, and he's a late developer, and I'm sure he'll have his times in the years to come where he's out and he hasn't hit that yet. But it really made me feel good to think, oh yeah, they're growing up. They whether I have the odd glass of low alcohol cava or not, they're growing up in a house where alcohol doesn't feature.
Yeah.
And that makes me feel really, really good. And I'm so proud of that. And that is like, whatever else we go through as a family, whatever bits that I would love to kind of iron out, you know, issues wise and personality clashes wise, I think that's one gift that we're giving them, or that Dave, led by Dave, and especially as something about, I'm not going to say it's something about but maybe I'm projecting because of things I've been through in the past with the drama around drink and that being witnessed by children.
Yeah.
And there was a point where that was creeping in, absolutely 100% but that's gone. And there's not a day goes by where I don't feel so grateful that doesn't feature. Whatever else we don't get right as a family or as parents, step parents, with that issue isn't there. And that is just like, you know, because we all feel that we're going to mess our kids up, don't we? And there's that, you know, feeling that we probably all do in some way, but
yeah,
I'm just so grateful that isn't something that they're seeing and experiencing.
It's showing them that they can have fun, I think, as well.
Yeah.
Without alcohol. But I just wanted to take you back a little bit to what you said about I've forgotten already. Why do I do that?
She does this lately. It's busy.
Don't, the brain fog, honestly.
I am having real brain fogs.
It's
right.
terrible.
About not wanting to stop drinking, because I remember with my ex be like doing a dry January, and on the first week in January we went out for a meal and I ordered wine and he was like, oh, you're not doing dry January with me? And I was like, no, I don't need to do it. I don't need to stop. I'm absolutely fine. You're the one with the issue.
Yeah.
So I just totally got that. But what I do want to ask you, Em, is did you ever have this discussion with Dave, and did you ever ask him to stop drinking?
So he often says, and it's lovely where he always says when he's talking, oh, Em never gave me an ultimatum. And I didn't, and it's nice to hear him say that, whether I should have done or shouldn't have done. But I feel good that he obviously came to it himself. But what happened was, I think I just never in a million years believed he would stop. So we would, as every couple, you have a blazing row. We were having a lot of blazing rows. There were huge periods of disconnection and tension and stress and horrible things being said back and forth. And that separation, that feeling of separation. But because of the things that I would always say, well, you were drunk again, but actually, I think horrible things would get said. The sort of making up or the analysing of what happened the night before would be about probably the horrible things that were said, rather than, but why did you say those horrible things? Yeah. You said those horrible things because you'd had 2.5 bottles of wine before 8 o'clock. Whereas I would, and actually probably, if I'd been able to realise earlier on that it wasn't him, doesn't excuse the bad behaviour, but I would just fixate on on my, you know, very hurt feelings or the unacceptable behaviour.
Yeah.
If I'm explaining it properly, I know what I mean.
You just never connected the two.
I didn't, like I did, because I knew that he drank too much, but I think in my mind it was like, this is Dave.
Yeah.
He ain't ever going to stop. And, you know, and like me, I've said it before, like me, not as someone, again, who's luckily got the moderate button, never understanding, be like, darling, you know, you don't need to fill that wine up to the very top. You don't need to drink it so quickly. Should we just have, you know, why don't, because we knew that he could never stop at one bottle, but it would be, oh, why don't you just say on the Friday night, you're just going to have one bottle? I've got my Prosecco. I'll have a little bit of Prosecco. Yeah. I won't touch your bottle of red wine. That's yours, but let's just do it that. And I naively, because that wasn't possible. So the point of, I think it just became very clear in the time leading up to him drinking to stopping was the breaking point where he often tells us of me just kind of breaking down and saying, I can't do this anymore. But it wasn't, if you don't stop, you're out the door, you know. It was never that, because I couldn't imagine I couldn't imagine us not being together. Even when he had his, you know, that horrendous rock bottom, as he says, and slept on the beach in Eastbourne, you know, went AWOL for 3 or 4 nights, slept in his van, slept on the beach, phone was off. I was, you know, beside myself. And it's a miracle. I mean, you know, what I imagine he was pouring, you know, bottles of vodka, and I don't even think then, I remember when he came back and we went to the doctor, but even then he didn't, there was a lack of honesty, obviously. So it was more that and you know, he'll probably, there was a lot of, I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, but there was a lot of blaming his stress and breakdowns on external pressures.
I think a lot of people do that as well, though. I think a lot of people who are going through, you know, like when I think back to when that came to a head with me and my drinking, for example, which was at the height of my first miscarriage, and my mental health was shattered. Even I, as the person drinking, didn't make the link for a long time that what was actually shattering my mental health. Yes, of course, I was damaged because of the miscarriage, but I was prolonging it because of the alcohol.
Absolutely.
And even I didn't make that link myself. And actually, once I gave up the alcohol, I was able to heal from that mentally. So I can see why there would be that blaming. It's what we do. It's the human way of being in denial.
And that was the pattern of our conflict from day one. It was, you know, my narrative was, oh my God, he's made a terrible mistake. He's trapped. He doesn't want to be with me, doesn't want to be in this. It's too much pressure for him, you know. And then the kind of, well, who else would put up with this, you know, all this pressure? I don't want to say it all, but you know, you get the gist of what, you know, responsibility, all of that. And so I just felt this, he's picked the wrong life. He's found himself in the wrong life. And because there was a hell of a lot of blame and lashing out verbally. If it wasn't for this, I wouldn't be feeling like this. And actually, even now as I'm saying it, I think, God, how did we not make the connection? And so it was just awful, kind of vicious circle of me saying, well, go then, you know, you're clearly not happy. And then obviously me doing this with my babies and kind of, you know, pushing him away, him feeling more isolated because we're all rejecting him because he's so difficult to be around. So, but I mean, it is honestly, and often I feel like a bit of a fraud when I share this part of our story, my story, because the miracle is that Dave stopped two and however long years, 2 years ago. And so far has never drunk again, has never relapsed. And you know, we never know, but there seems no sign at the moment that will change. You know, he seems so committed to his path, and it's such a wonderful thing to see. But I haven't experienced, I cannot begin to imagine how I would, where I would be at now, mentally, emotionally, on every level, if I was having to live with the unpredictability. That's one thing I didn't have. He predictably drank constantly. So I knew where I was. I certainly knew where I was with it. But if I cannot, it makes me shudder to think of him now, because I have nightmare. You know, he'll wake up saying, oh my God, I dreamt I drank last night. And I'll wake up going, oh my God, I dreamt you were drinking. My daughter, who's 11 last week, she went, Mum, I had a dream that Dave was drunk. You know, it's like, if we were in that cycle as a family, that would be worse, I think, almost than him just drinking. I think because the adrenaline and the kind of
constant relapse back on it. I get
the hypervigilance.
Yeah, I get that. And I think, can I just ask then, before I'm sorry, we're keeping you for ages, but before you do end up going off, can I ask you about what life's been like since? And I don't mean like, you know, obviously you're still on your own journey, you're still, as you've said, you're undergoing treatment. Can you now, a lot of the disbelief that we see when you're telling your story, I think is just like, oh my God, I think some realizations happen as you're telling them, you know, like, it's
so true. And that's what's so brilliant about these conversations, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know.
So like now you're in it now, and you're in this kind of present now with Sober Dave, who's doing amazing things. He's helping other people. You're helping other people. You're a public speaker yourself now. You know, you've both got these kind of journeys where you're both thriving in different ways. How has like life changed? In what ways has life changed having Dave go sober for the family?
Yeah, well, I mean, so many more positives than negatives. So the immediate kind of feeling of emotional safety, the kind of safety. So as far all the obvious benefits as far as the kids go of, you know, the explosive rows kind of almost disappeared overnight, and you know, we still have the odd bad little patch, but it's nothing like it used to be. So that relief, that kind of, you know, hypervigilance, like I often say, the fact that he and I just fell back into this kind of linked, connected, I'm doing this with my hands, you know, place that we naturally, we are very compatible. You know, I feel so lucky to have met someone who I can share so much with. We've both found us, we've got, you know, so many parallels. We've both found ourselves in an unexpected place in our lives where we're passionately working through our own shit and our own stuff and our own insights and our own growth and expansion, stumbling along the way, you know, dealing with all those layers. But ultimately we both are aligned in who we are now, and how we see our own potential, and how we want how we see other people's potential. You know, his passion for helping with his coaching and the energy and the hours he gives to kind of talking and sharing and answering questions is so wonderful to see, and it comes from such a genuine place. And with me, I you know, on my cancer journey, I spent so many years in such darkness and lost so many moments, unable to connect with any kind of joy or lightness. So for me now to still be, you know, I was at the hospital yesterday having my targeted chemo. There's never an arrival point where you've nailed it. You know, there's not a day that goes by. It must filter the cancer thoughts endlessly in my mind, but somehow you know, I've learned some coping techniques and tools that I've managed. Mine comes back to mindset, and I've worked really hard on that. But he and I mean, it's just, he's present, obviously. He's highly, highly present. We sleep in the same bed at night, except when one of us, you know, I think we both have a bit of a snoring issue, which is so that's the only reason now that we don't occasionally sleep in the same bed. And his wisdom and it's funny because even now sometimes I forget how much I can trust him emotionally now. So the old Dave, and I know we haven't got long, but the old Dave and I'm sure maybe you can relate to this, or from other people's experiences, that horrendous thing when someone's had too much to drink and they send a text, or the keyboard warrior, you know, the keyboard nightmare of waking up. And he was never a loose cannon socially where he'd embarrass me at a party or anything, but he would, that dog with the bone kind of, if someone upset him, and then I'd say to him before I'd go to bed, darling, just leave that. Don't answer that text tonight. And the next morning there would have been, you know, horrific sort of exchange have gone on, and you know, and it would be all drink fueled. And even recently there was a kind of a situation where he had to talk to someone about something, and I was, Ty, just, you know, oh God, just stay calm. And he handled it amazingly, and it's like, he is calm. He's not like so it's almost like I forget sometimes that I don't have to worry, that it's, you know, I can relax, I can trust him, you know. Nice. You know, and so and those personality traits, because what drink does is, it doesn't it, I think it heightens those parts of, you know, what do they say? So if you're feeling low, it'll probably make you feel lower. If you know, like he's might still have certain character traits that don't always find it easy to let go. But he's just amazing, and it's changed everything. I mean, of course, in some fantasy world, it would be lovely to think if we ever go on holiday again. But actually, that was only the first, you know, it's those first, like the idea of the first holiday where you're not having that lovely glass of wine by the pool. We've done that now. It doesn't matter. It's the idea.
You were on holiday last year, weren't you? You managed to get away last year, and I know that Dave was doing quite a bit of messaging on his Instagram about it, because I know he had some tough days. You know,
he did. He did, and it's like, but I think now that we've come through so many of those firsts, we have as a couple. I don't even think about it now. You know, and I'm really mindful. You know, I made a few mistakes back at the beginning because he's so stressed. He stressed the fact so strongly that this is my problem. you have a drink if you want. And there was one occasion quite early on where a friend came round and we were, you know, the bottle of Prosecco was on the table. There was only one bottle over a long evening, but we were, you know, pouring it in front of him, and he got really agitated, and I felt a bit like defensive, like, God, you know, I should be allowed to have my friends. But now again, it's like, because he almost did too well at the beginning, I then went through a period of not being sensitive enough, because he just was so determined to, come on, we're going to go and sit in a pub, I'll have a lime and soda, yeah, we're going to go to that party where there's a free bar, don't worry, I'm fine. So, and then it took a while for the penny to drop. Come on, Em, you need to, you know, let's be mindful here. So I'm you know, I feel that I'm very respectful of his choice, and it just doesn't feature in our life together.
Yeah, you know, I think you've done really well, because, you know, like Lisa makes no secret of with her relationship, I mean, it didn't work out, did it, Lisa? And it wouldn't have worked out anyway, probably.
No, definitely not. What happened is I tried when he got sober, and I realised that he was just as much of an arsehole sober as he was drunk. and he now drinks again. So it wouldn't. But just listening to you, honestly, there were parts where you were talking, and I'm a fidgeter anyway, and I'm like crawling under the table. I can feel the emotion that you're saying. I can feel like the atmosphere in the air.
Tension,
and the tension. And when you were saying about the kids and how they blame, like, you know, the stress of the children, and how much you take that on as a person and think, it's my fault because they're my children, and
oh my God,
this,
and then you turn on your own children almost.
Oh,
it's like, just be quiet, you know, and it's like, this isn't messed up, you know. And
I don't think you realise, Em, how bad it is at the time until you kind of look back on it. Because it becomes like your normal, you know, you're living that every single day. You learn how to deal with it and dodge the emotions and fix everything and tell your children to be quiet and leave him alone at this time and that time.
I know.
Now, looking back, you're like, oh my God, how did I do that? So no wonder your dreams are nightmares if he's going to have Dave coming in.
He made us laugh the other day, you know, Em. He made us laugh the other day because he had the photograph of the tiny little cup and he called himself Decaf Dave.
I was laughing.
I mean, literally, he's now, no sugar, no caffeine. And I said to him last night in bed, I said, so how long is the coffee thing? Oh no, I'm done. I said, me and coffee, it's done. And I'm like, got my secret chocolates. Me saying, I'm Miss Moderate. You know, literally my chocolate consumption over lockdown is kind of, I'm doing this because I'm looking around to show you like the Tony's chocolate that I've become obsessed with. But yeah, it's like, it's slightly annoying.
I get it. This sober thing, it's not just about stopping drinking. You end up on this journey of literally cutting everything out of your life. Like I've gone toxic free this year. Well, I'm trying to have like my house as non-toxic.
Yeah.
And then I don't eat meat anymore. I must be so irritating to people. Be like, and I've actually been told by people like, God, what do you do? And I'm like,
I'll tell you what she does, which I'm so glad about, is caffeine now. Because Lisa actually had a problem up until very recently with my caffeine intake, but now she's got a bigger one. So I'm happy with that, and I can deal with the no meat, and I can deal with everything else.
Yeah, exactly. It's so funny. It's so funny, but we should all. I mean, what you're doing is incredible, and what is just. Because I knew nothing about this topic really, and it is, as I'm sure when David observes my kind of cancer conversations, you know, it's incredible to see how many people need to have this light shone on these issues, and just in the most normal, relatable way from those who've lived it from whatever side. And I think that's what's just so fantastic about what you do, what he does, you know, and I try and do another one. You know, it's just brilliant. It's brilliant,
isn't it? And I think we're all so ashamed. Well, not anymore. But we were ashamed to talk about it. You know, the word alcoholic, the dependent, or people drinking too much. It's got so much stigma and shame around it. I got a message actually on my Facebook today of the girl I used to go to school with. and she's been sober 2 years, and she said she's never spoke about it to anybody. She said, but I just wanted you to know that I'm listening to your podcast and I see what you do on Facebook, and I just think it's amazing, but I've never really told anybody I'm sober. And I'm like, but you never know who is listening, you know,
who you're influencing.
being open and talking about these things. So
I know. And not everybody feels that they want to, you know, that's what, in a way, I've said this quite a lot recently, where, you know, if social media works for you, if it's something that you don't have to be you use it on your own terms.
Yeah.
So you can be just watching from the shadows and getting as much. You don't have to. If you feel like you want to engage and enter the conversation, that's great, but otherwise it's just I get lots of DMs from, oh, you know, I don't talk about it on here, but
yeah,
you know, and it's like, yeah, you're getting in that, they're getting a nugget here and a nugget there of something that they can take away, you know.
Well, we're dead grateful that Dave got sober, because obviously we met him, we've met you, and your story, honestly, I know we chatted separately anyway when you very recently, but I've got massive admiration for you every day. Think you're doing incredible, and you really are like a thriver. You couldn't call you a survivor, because you're amazing. To have gone through what you went through, and I did want to say it earlier on, but I didn't want to interrupt the flow. I've got one 5-year-old who's just turned 5 last week. Now, I've got 2 older children, but one 5-year-old. To have gone through 3 of those at the same time with cancer and an alcoholic partner, you've got to be a thriver. There's no way. You've got to be a thriver. You're amazing.
Thank you so much. And I thank you. I could say all of that, you know. I feel great love for you too. Really do. I think you're amazing. And I just love being a woman, and I love the fact that, I know we've talked about Dave, and I know, but I love the fact that we can just, there's so much connection as well, and there's so much honesty, isn't there, and that we can all support each other on our journeys. And the thriver word is a funny one, because again, it's one of those words that gets kind of not bandied around, but it's but I guess I can't think of another word. It's like, yeah, I don't want to just be a survivor. I want to be someone who's living successfully, as in emotionally successfully, with whatever that challenge is, you know, whether it's cancer, whether it's addiction, whatever it is, you know, it's about finding your own way of accessing your own joy and potential and happiness.
Incredible. Thank you so
much for sharing.
I don't know how you found the time, by the way, but thank you.
Oh no, it's a joy. It's a real joy, and I can't wait to see what I'm, you know, my post-run kind of messy attire. But
we didn't mention that, did we?
We need to mention it. Sorry, Em's been on a run. She normally looks very, very glamorous, even though she looks beautiful and fresh right now. We did say we'd mention it.
Looks amazing. I think when people have just come off a run, they look absolutely beautiful. You just look natural and fresh and amazing. So,
but it was only like 10 minutes before we started chatting, and I was quickly, I said to Dave, oh, it's just a podcast. He went, no, I think they're recording it. I was like,
yeah, these are the bits you don't see Em coming on going, it is just an audio, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, it's not, Em.
Never mind.
For ages.
Thank you so much, both of you.
Thanks
again, Em.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.